I believe we are all a little crazy, are we? My guests today are Jason Shapiro. Hi, Jason.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And my pleasure, Jason. And Eric Kussin. Hi, Eric.
How you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Great.
So I'd like to introduce Jason, my Livingston townmate. You have a corporate retail job, but you're also an author. And you have been writing, you wrote The Magic of Mayfair, and then you've been writing more children's books. And what I get is that from those books, you're also bringing out how you or people you know around you have pulled themselves, either succumbed or pulled themselves out of mental ill health, so to say, the demons that we all fight with. So I'd definitely like to hear from you about that. And I want to hear how you and Eric met, because Eric, the more I see, it seems like more of a rock star. So a quick intro on you, Eric. You had a successful career at the NBA league office, and then life took a turn that has brought you where you are today, following a whole different path and a whole different course. So why don't we get started? Jason, let's hear more about you. What has life brought you, lessons learned and experiences? Share those with us. And then how did you bring Eric into in this picture?
Eric into my life. So basically, it's a pretty interesting story. And, if you kind of believe in, I don't know if it's fate or kind of just doing what your heart feels. About 2 years ago, I decided to write my memoir, my life story. And I was never a writer. It wasn't something that I did. It wasn't a hobby. It wasn't anything of that sort. And you talk about just being blessed and finding your passion. Some people can go their entire life and they don't seem to find it. And in my early 40s, kind of dating myself, but now in my mid 40s, but in my early 40s, I somehow got this itch to write my book, The Magic of Mayfair. Growing up in the 1980s and what life was like, I always cherished my childhood. I always say it was growing up in suburban paradise on the west coast of Florida. And you can think of just, the resurgence, almost like the 1950s or 60s, but now we're in the 1980s, kids in every house, just a wonderful, magical time. And I was always, it always was my place that I went back to that made me really happy. So along with being happy and having this amazing, magical childhood comes the struggles and challenges of life. And as Eric will get into, kind of the trauma that can come from, life challenges and tragic events. So it was very cathartic for me to write and really kind of get that part out. I won't give the story away, but ultimately it really follows the story about my relationship with my younger brother, my father, who was kind of this bigger than life personality, and my childhood best friend who I introduced you to at the beginning of the book. And you find out what happens to those individuals. And when I was writing the book, I was just writing what my truth was. I didn't set out to say, hey, I'm going to be an advocate for, normalizing conversation around mental health. I was just writing my story. And, you end up finding out what happens, how 2 out of those 3 people are impacted by severe mental illness, and how that impacted me and how that really, created the stress and trauma in my life. And when I released the book and published the book, I started to read the Amazon reviews, and all of them started going back to the mental health piece. Yes, people talked about the magical childhood and, the water balloon fights and skateboard ramps and biking and race cars and things of that nature. But, I started to read all of the comments, and the majority of them were rooted back to overcoming life challenges, mental health, how important it is to be able to speak about it. So, in Livingston, I've always been somebody that is a self-marketer, if you will. I love the thrill of trying to create something and then market it and get it out there. So, leveraging technology, I was on Facebook, and I leveraged our local town Facebook group. And I basically said, hey, I've got this book. It seems like it's resonating with people. And I really I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, but I knew I wanted to do something in honor of these 2 people that were severely impacted by mental illness. And for myself too, it was a way to cope with a lot of the things that I was dealing with. So I asked the question, and I said, does anyone out there have any mental health nonprofits that they could get me kind of looped in with and help me get aligned with them? And there was somebody in town that reached out and gave me Eric's name. And I did some research on Eric, and I was watching YouTube videos on Eric and his organization. And I said, this guy's never going to get back to me. There's no way. I'm like, this guy's got this celebrity alliance. He's on all these different talk shows and interviews and podcasts. And I said, there's just no way. So I was expecting to hear back from like one of the local, kind of nonprofits here. And lo and behold, Eric reached out, the type of person that he is. And you guys will see here in a minute what a treat is to hear his story. And treated me as if we had known each other for years, and opened up his arms in regards to, welcoming me into his mission and his journey. And both of our missions really align beautifully in regards to what we're doing now, talking about the topic, not, and Eric will talk about kind of the breaking the stigma. It was different. Eric's organization was different than the typical nonprofit rhetoric that you would hear around mental health organizations. And really, I'd say it's probably been about 6 months. We were pre-pandemic. Eric and I and somebody else in town were going to do a really great fundraiser in town. That didn't happen. So Eric and I have figured out how to kind of maneuver around this virtual world together. I think his message and just him as a person is so important to this topic around talking about life challenges and normalizing conversation around mental health, that I've done everything I can to bring him into my area, my life, my town, because I think that everybody should be able to hear and be part of what he's doing. So hopefully I answered your question and I didn't go too long there.
Not at all. And so that brings us to you, Eric. So I believe we are all a little crazy, are we? Right.
So we wanted to come with a name that was collective, because the way that I experienced learning about mental health in a lived experience perspective made me realize there's not a single person on this planet whose mental health isn't impacted. And if we're going to get everyone to understand that concept, we have to shake the trees a little bit. We have to get a little bit out there and be a little bit different. And the marketing has to be catchy enough in a way that, how often could I use the term crazy in a sentence where I'm not meaning it to refer to mental illness? So Jason, that Ohio State shirt you're wearing is crazy, nice look on you. Or, the set that you have, is the lighting is really crazy good, right? We use these words in everyday language.
You just kind of played on the word crazy, because yes, things are crazy. We use it for all casual purposes and not so casual purposes. It's a bad word and an okay word. That's okay. But the thing is, we all have something that we are dealing with. Some things we label and some things are left undiagnosed and unlabeled. So now what I see is that it's a situation that has actually played in front of my eyes, where this child was having problem in school, and the school referred the child to go to a psychologist and for some kind of evaluation. And the psychologist actually said, oh, what town are you from? Oh, you're from that town. They're always trying to label children, as many as they can. So that parent's heart sank, that why, children are crazy sometimes. They do crazy stuff. We did that too. And now we're suddenly going out and labeling everything. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect is needs going unnoticed, calling for attention. That's the bullying pandemic. That's the pandemic that Jason and I were talking about when we spoke casually a couple of days ago, that this whole bullying situation is the pandemic that has been, kind of eating our world and eating our children's psyche.
Piggybacking on your conversation about bullying and needs, I think the fascinating thing, I'm following what's going on in Livingston because Jason put me on the Facebook thread and Mike put me on the Facebook thread. And, the way that teachers and students interact, right? And I remember from when I was a student, it's like you're speaking up in class. So now there's the punitive damage of your desk is being sat next to the teacher's desk or moved to the back of the room, or you're sent to the principal's office. And taking a step back from that and understanding that a child's behavior is based on a feeling, which is based on an experience that they had. Okay. So if a child is bullied, now a child feels empty, let's use that term for it, from being bullied, or sad or anxious or whatever word you want to put to it, because we each feel different things from different difficult events and experiences. And then based on feeling that, we also act out differently, right? There's some similarities in those differences, but some child who's feeling empty speaks a lot because they need a lot of attention. Some child who feels empty doesn't say anything and they sit there, right? And so you have this child who's misbehaving in class or at home, and immediately you're thinking, why does that child hate me as a teacher? Why are they taking it out on me? Or as a parent, why doesn't my son or daughter like me? That's most oftentimes not what it's about. It's about what was the preceding event that led to the feeling that now leads to the actions, right? Bullying being a big piece of it. So think of your average child who could go through any of the above: the fighting of their parents, the divorce of their parents losing their house because of a job, their parents losing a job, other family members getting sick, other family members passing away, their friends getting verbally abused, hearing about their friends getting sexually abused, friends breaking up, right, as friends and not getting along with one another. Like, the list is a mile long, and I was like, there's not a person in this world, even by the age of like 7 or 8 years old, who hasn't dealt with some or many of those things.
So if somebody reaches out to Same Here Global or We Are All a Little Crazy, what is the process that you take them through to heal them?
So we ended up creating programs in 5 main areas: K through 12, colleges, corporate offices, servicemen and women and first responders, and then sports teams and leagues. The 5th one is kind of niche, but it was just because that's where my background and some of my relationships were. And so each one of them are named after Same Here. So Same Here School, Same Here Sports, Same Here Service, right? And within those, then there's different pillars that we then go into different community groups, organizations to help change the culture, right? So I'll use K through 12 in schools as an example, because we just made an exciting announcement that we partnered with a local gentleman who was in Long Island, who used to work for the county, is now coming and working with us, and he's going to be a consultant implementing Same Here schools in 6 school districts next year, like Locust Valley, Valley Stream, Manhasset, Roslyn, Sayville, North Shore. And in those districts, what we do is everything from the assembly programs, right, which help lay the foundation for that culture change. So those assembly programs are a combination of sports meets pop culture meets vulnerable story sharing. And when you combine vulnerable story sharing in there, you start to open up the room. That allows you to talk about the science of how stress and trauma affects our system. And then an initial dipping our toe into what we call STAR exercises. And this will help more directly answer your question. So again, even with programs, what are we teaching people? So since I healed through breathing, the idea was there must be multiple modalities out there that can help people actually heal from different events they've been through in their life, or if not heal, be proactive about strengthening their central nervous system so that as challenging life events happen, you can more appropriately be able to address them as they start to hit you. So STAR stands for stress and trauma, active, release, and rewiring. Okay. So stress and trauma, the 2 things that are building up inside of us. Active was a very important word in the middle there, because we have to actively do these exercises. We can't sit in our bed and wait to get magically better like I did.
Really very interested in how this program works with children, because I feel that if we can catch them young and make them stronger, more resilient, and teach them these very good practices of life, they will not have these problems in their adulthood.
Yeah. Whether they will not have them or they'll have less of them at least, right? Yeah. They'll be able to better handle them. I'm only saying that because we don't get to control the outside factors of what happens to us in life, right? So we'll better be able to handle and understand the stresses and traumas that come our way. I'll give you a little anecdote to tell you kind of how the working with children side of things work. So the first time I ever did a program with really young kids, it was a school in Port Washington, Long Island. And they decided to bring the 2nd and 3rd graders in, and they're all sitting there. It's so cute. And they have these I asked them to bring something to write with. So they all had these clipboards, and I gave out this piece of paper that had the same key or hand in the middle. They were able to write their name underneath. And then there were 4 circles around the hand, right, on the piece of paper. I didn't tell them what we were going to do with it. And I just started talking, and I started sharing my story. And obviously when you're talking with young kids, you can't use terms like septic shock, right? But you can tell your story in a way of my brother got sick or my brother got into a car accident, right? And what I start to explain to them is how these things cumulatively built up inside of me, right? And because I didn't know to address it and talk about it, unfortunately, what ended up happening was I myself got sick from it, and it took me down, right? And so middle of that session, I stopped and I said, okay, you guys all have and there's 500 kids sitting with the clipboards. And I said, listen, no one's going to ask you to share, totally for you to be able to do this. You all have a pencil on you. I shared some of the challenges I faced in my life. What are some of the challenges you face in your life? And I didn't even give them a head start. I didn't give them examples and say, you can write them down in the circles. And if you want to keep it to yourself, you can keep it to yourself. We're going to take the next 5 minutes. And you're hearing, right? And they're writing. I said, okay, ready. I said, it's okay if there's no one in this room of 500 of you, but is there even one person, don't feel obligated, that would like to share? All of a sudden, I'd say 300 of these 500 hands went up. And of the 300, the majority of them were the youngest kids, like the kids were in the front, right? And I go up to the first child and I hold the microphone. What do you want to share? And you know, it's cute because like they can't remember, so they got to look down and read it as they're saying. 3 of my pets died this year, and it made me very sad, right? And so obviously, like my heart is like exploding as this kid's saying this. Meanwhile, again now, maybe not 300, but 200 kids in the room jump up as this kid says, my pets died too. My pets died too. And as much as that's not something that you want to either smile or laugh about, the joy that the kids were getting out of connecting with the fact that they weren't the only ones and that they could relate to this person, what it reinforced for me was at a young age, we're wired for connection, right? You talked about the power of storytelling. When we open up at a young age, we want to be able to be the same, right? Back to same here. We want to be able to be the same as other people. And we want to be able to connect with their experiences. And when we do that, right, what happens? Other people start to open up and start to share, right? And so what I noticed from that experience was at such a young age, we can begin this conversation about life challenges. It doesn't have to get so heavy, but what are some of the things that bother us? And as the kids started to share, my grandfather has Alzheimer's disease. He doesn't remember my name, right? Like, again, adorable the way he mispronounced the word, sickening that his grandfather's sick and how upset the child is. But what a release for that child to be able to talk about a grandfather being sick, and that bothers them. I think that things as simple as, what if you were on a plane as a 3-year-old and you had terrible turbulence, and now every time your parents go to Aruba, right, once a year, and it's the most exciting thing for everyone in the family, everyone's talking about how much sun they're going to get and water and how much fun. And meanwhile, from that one bad experience you had, you don't want to be the one that ruffles feathers. So you're sitting there biting your tongue for 2 weeks before the plane flight's about to happen. I don't like that experience when we go and fly. What's going to happen when we fly? I don't know what's going to happen, right? Circling around in our head because we don't give our kids tools to be able to open up and talk about these things. And when they see that we're happy, the last thing a child wants to do is infringe on that happiness. That's that, you know, like we see that we're like, I need to act a certain way to keep that going. And on the flip side, even my parents are fighting sometimes. I need to be the one who's extra happy to create joy in this space because there's fighting going on. So we don't create environments that allow children to share. And hopefully that helps in that. I actually think, to your point, if we get to students earlier, that's the most important thing because we're getting them at a time when they're not too cool for school.
When students come to me for public speaking, and I always tell them, I said, well, public speaking is just the expression used because it's widely understood, but public speaking really is the last thing that you'll get to. It's communication first, and before communication, it's conviction. Know who you are. And I tell them a lot of stories of my own stories. They realize, oh, she had that experience too. Oh, she's vulnerable too. So she also felt failure and she picked up the pieces and put herself together again. So maybe I can do that too. And that's why they open up. And then I had read this word somewhere called awesome, FLAWSOME. And when I write it on the board and I say, have you seen this word before? 99.9% honestly say, no, I have not seen this word before because it's not a real word. But I had seen it somewhere. I will not plagiarize. It's not my word. I saw it somewhere. I don't remember where. But this is literally the first class. And I said, do you know what? I break it up as, what do you think it means? And most of the kids will say, again, trying to be very positive, they'll say, I think it means flawless and awesome. I always tell them, I said, no, let's be real. Do you think you're flawless? Do you think I'm flawless? I don't think that's the case. So let's own up that we are flawed, yet awesome. Does that sound good? It's such a liberating feeling for them at that moment. Oh, she's also flawed yet awesome. And I'm also flawed yet awesome. So having worked with so many children, I feel that, yes, we've got to start talking about this at an early stage in their lives so that they grow up more resilient. So, well, that's a whole different chapter. But so when I heard you talk to Mike and Saba and Andrew that day on Coffee Talk on Livingston Education, that you were building programs for kids, that's why I wanted to reach out to both of you and discuss about what plans you have for children, because I think I want to support such plans, such programs. I go to the Livingston Public School website and I see that they have a social skills program. That is the category that something like this would fall into. So yes, I think maybe right now it might be just checking off the list, because academics is something that we more, stress upon more, because somehow when we define success, we think of, okay, what college did your child go to? And what job? Did he get a job immediately after college? Or no? Oh, no, he didn't. So what is he doing right now? Wasting his life away? They may not say it, but they may mean it. And you get it in the tone of voice. So,
yeah.
Right? So,
yeah.
To education to parents and educators and ourselves, that success is not just defined in terms of grades and colleges and your professional placements.